you think even a bit like I do, you have probably remembered a game you loved, like that game was Kino, I should replay that. But then you replay it and remember all the stuff you didn't actually like about it, which you didn't recall being such a large portion of the game. That's what happened with Dark Messiah for me. Before the new multiplayer slop from Arkane, Dark Messiah was their biggest departure from the core immersive sim formula. If you are looking for the standard Arkane flair in this game, you will leave a bit disappointed. It's the most linear game, least atmospheric, and with fluctuating quality of level design. The game is also a fucking pain to set up. I will put the whole pcgamingwiki page of the game in the description, and I would recommend you do everything the page says to have a stable, relatively high frame rate and stutter-free experience. That won't stop the crashes though. Hope you don't die too much and reload the game, cause fucking hell the game just loves to crash. It makes unmodded Fallout New Vegas seem like a well-oiled machine. So why go through all the trouble of setting up this game after all the negatives I have said about it already? Well, because when everything clicks, Dark Messiah still has the most enjoyable first-person melee combat of any game I have played. The combat just feels great. Weapons have the satisfying weight to them that makes swinging them even in the air feel satisfying. The animations are smooth on both my character and the enemies. All the weapons, the special attacks and the sneak attacks connect with the enemies in a way that I can actually feel the impact. As the sound on these is excellent. The clashing of swords, the enemies responding and reacting, the sound effect on the spells, everything is really good quality wise. Mixing wise though, the footsteps are way too loud compared to other things in the mix. Dark Messiah is a game where you are pretty often outnumbered and outgunned, so dealing with anything head on is suicide. So you need to improvise. It's the land of conspicuously placed spike rack and fragile scaffolding, and you have a kick strong enough to teach someone how to fly. You need to make the environment your ally and forget everything about honor in fights. It's a street fight and you are hurling anything you can at your enemies, and you use spells to set them on fire. Okay, well, it's not exactly like a street fight, but the ethos of someone falling and hitting their head on the road to end the fight remains. The way the game necessitates environmental interaction during combat is woven into its magic system as well. Why freeze someone temporarily when you can freeze the ground? Why hit someone with weak fire arrows when you can set them on fire by throwing oil on them first? The game always rewards being creative and observant. The enemies aren't. They won't even realize what got their shit rocked.
Don't move, buddy.
Sometimes these require a bit more setup and player action, but insta kills will always be satisfying. Then there's the kick. This is the most legendary kick in video game history. Dark Messiah's combat is at its best when you are moving around, cycling between spells, kicks and your primary weapon, throwing barrels, destroying the scaffolding and running around causing chaos. The enemies are fast and deadly, you better not let them reach you. And sometimes you can bring even more carnage. On your way to finish the mission, why not start a little goblin prison break? Or let out an orc that was kept captive in goblin territory.
Stupid goblin! You're going to stomp all over goblin in 3 faces.
That didn't go how I expected it to go. As you fight enemies using direct and indirect method, you build up an adrenaline meter. This lets you either use a more powerful version of the spell you have or insta-kill an enemy in slow motion. But what I said only holds for humanoid enemies. And that's the problem with the game's combat. Every time there's non-human enemies like spiders and whatever these are, the fight stops being fun and there's large section of the game where there's just a bunch of spiders in a featureless cave. They poison you, jump from everywhere, and they have a bunch of health, and in general are really annoying. I'm an apprentice wizard. I want to kill dragons and fight orcs, not do pest control. Dark Messiah is a crisp looking game. It has some good sides, the environments are always well detailed, and the sharp lighting present in the levels add depth to it all. There's details in the environment, so nothing just feels empty. As water trickles down in sewers, the weird writing and statues underground, this overall means that the visuals have aged pretty well and the levels still look good, even if the levels themselves might not be my favorites. The one issue I have is that the game is way too dark in parts. I know you can adjust the brightness, but I didn't want to be flashbanged every time I went outside. But that meant I had to use dark side constantly, which makes everything look dull. Another problem with the levels is that they don't really have a good atmosphere with either environmental audio or music, so I never quite felt in them. To be honest, I can't remember if this game had music. I mean, it did, but it's so forgettable that I forget about it when I'm not actively hearing it. Also, these levels are Arkane's most linear by far. A lot of these even have fully on-rail sections like this cheese across rooftops or this section where the giant worm appears. I don't mind this actually. Sometimes in a game where story progression is this linear, this can be fun shifts in the main gameplay loop. But in the more standard levels, the progression is pretty flat and a set path is to be followed. We get a rope arrow like Thief, but unlike Thief, using it is mandatory for progression in some instances and it can't really open new paths. The main motivation for exploration then are the secrets. This game is filled with them. I'm pretty sure I haven't found the vast majority of them, and since the resources carry between levels and I'm always chugging potions, these are always decently useful. Sometimes they can even contain something like an infinite quiver for your bow or useful and powerful weapons. These are very good. Though I'm always a bit wary of using rope arrows to get anywhere in this game, even to secrets, as the collision is kinda janky and easy to get stuck on everything while rope climbing. Dark Messiah is a bit jank in general, like when you move your character and your arms take a few moments to catch up, and I have had moments where I would use a spell and the game wouldn't register it, and the melee combat never felt consistent. The game's balance is also all over the place. I didn't put many points in melee combat this time, hoping to get through the game using a stealth and magic build, which works fine for most of the game, but in the late game when the game spams high health ghouls which you cannot stealth attack, it's pretty tedious to kill them cause the spells don't do much damage and the knockdown attack with daggers need like 3 taps before a single ghoul dies. It wouldn't be a problem with shields, but you can only equip them with swords, and any swords worth using needs points put into the skill tree. Similarly, I found out pretty quick that when not used to take advantage of the environment, the spells just suck down mana and don't do that much damage either, making wizard builds kind of a pain in the ass. At some points, using fire spells felt like I was trying to boil a kettle of water using a lighter flame. When I blast enemies with fireballs, I expect them to burn and die and not get up 2 seconds later like they slipped on a banana peel. The stealth skill tree is another weird thing. At first, stealth seems pretty useless as enemies randomly spot you and seem to have really good ears, but as soon as I reached level 3, the stealth became very easy. It's as if I went from being as stealthy as a mad cow in a china shop to being quite literally invisible in most places. And then there's the bows. They're pretty much useless in most combat scenarios. You won't have a line of sight from far enough away to use them in actual fights before the enemies reach you, and they won't do nearly as much damage as melee combat, so it's another part of the skill tree that feels weird.
Don't dismiss Arantir too lightly. There are rumors that he might be the Dark Messiah.
You're stuffing nonsense, girl. All 3 of us know better than that.
but the time is right for the prophecy.
I'll worry about dusty old prophecies. You worry about the expedition. You're in charge of it, after all.
Of course, Uncle. Good night. And to you too, Sareth.
Please don't tell me you find that sort of thing cute.
Let's get to the worst part of the game now, the story. I think this might be one of the worst stories I have seen in a game. It's poorly written, poorly paced, and has extremely bland characters, or at points actively cringe dialogue that seems to be written to appeal to 13-year-olds.
Oh, I'm so sorry for you, my dear. But there's nothing you could have done to save her. Besides, just between us, she wasn't your type.
But let's start from the beginning. We play as Sareth, Fenric's apprentice. Our task is to collect the Shantiri crystal. To keep us company and guide us in this task, Fenric puts Xana in the head of Sareth. Sareth collects the crystal and then has to deliver it to another wizard, Menelag. As he approaches Menelag's mansion, he is greeted by Liana, Menelag's niece and pupil, who has a very 2006 haircut. Then the next objective becomes clear. The crystal is needed to get the Skull of Shadows, but the crystal is stolen by a ghoul from the game's main antagonist, Arantir, and Menelag is killed. I love getting skill points in sad scenes. Now that the setup is done, let's talk about the character. Spoilers from this point on. So, the game is basically Sareth trying to get the Skull of Shadows for half of it. Liana falls in love with him as he saves her life, and Xana is disgusted every time you even interact with her. This is basically most of the dialogue in the game. You talk to Goody Two-Shoes Liana, and then Xana responds in your head with annoyance and flirts with Sareth. The dialogue between Xana and Sareth is the only fun character dynamic of the game.
Sareth? Praise Elath, you're safe! I was so worried about you. You must have been through a lot. Did you find the crystal?
Please, tell her no, just to see her reaction.
Though there were still several lines that made me cringe. Now, as you get the Skull of Shadows, it turns out you are the Dark Messiah, son of Lord of Demons, and Xana was a succubus. The first one is more shocking than the second revelation, but it's not a great twist regardless. It comes out of nowhere. The game doesn't do a good job of building this up. So, now that you know your father is evil and the choice comes down between choosing to side with him and the choice between Liana and Xana. All the endings suck and are underwhelming, but let's talk about Liana and Xana for a second. As Sareth says in his one good line in the whole game,
Indeed. I seem to be surrounded by women who want things from me.
Liana as a character is as flat and uninteresting as a piece of cardboard, with some really subpar voice acting in part.
You did it!
And Xana has more red flags than a Communist Party office.
Final gem, Sareth. It draws us together. Can you feel me in your blood like fire? Oh yes, my prince. We will be together. Forever.
But the fact that they fell in love with Sareth, a character so bland that he may as well have been a silent protagonist, makes no sense. Bitches love bland boys, I guess. Speaking of bland boys, Arantir. Remember I mentioned him earlier. He's a really forgettable character. I don't remember a single thing he did or said the entire game except kidnapping Liana. Dark Messiah of Might and Magic has an incredibly fun gameplay loop at its best, but there's a ton of stuff that can be improved in a sequel, namely the story and balancing, and the whole systems can be expanded, which we will never get because Ubisoft. But a lot of indie devs have started trying for something similar. I played the Sorcerer's demo and the kick makes a return, but while it comes out, it's always fun to just boot up a level and run wild sometimes. It's not the kind of game I prefer to play, but if more games took a few tips from Dark Messiah, maybe first-person melee combat wouldn't be such a dreaded part of games.